Well, good evening, morning, afternoon, depending where you are watching this from. Welcome to this channel as well as to this video. In this video, I believe that you will be inspired, encouraged, and challenged. For those of you who lack discipline, who maybe need a little boost, a jolt into your spiritual life, this will be powerful. For those of you who are maybe just love discipline, but you need to know also the purpose for living a disciplined life, I also believe this is going to be a powerful and very challenging interview for you. Dr. Malachi O'Brien is a pastor of the church at Pleasant Ridge. He's also a former VP of the Southern Baptist Convention, a CEO of Metatex Media, and a former president of One Cry. First, I came across him actually when he was speaking a year ago at Greg Locke's National Deliverance Conference. And then I started to see him on Twitter running every day. Now, my stance on running is the Bible says a wicked man runs where nobody chases him. So I was just curious, why would this guy be running? And he's not just running, he was running a marathon every single day. And so we're going to hear more about that. And I believe not only you're going to be blown away, but challenged and encouraged. So Dr. Malachi, how are you?
I am well, Vlad. I've been looking forward to this conversation since I heard you preach fire down from heaven at Greg Locke's conference 2 years ago. It was this is amazing. So I'm looking forward to this.
So you're a pastor. You're also an influencer online. I see you kind of everywhere. You have a family and you're running. So how did you get into running?
So the origin story of that is I was a runner all through high school. I probably looked to your audience like I was a star football player, but I was not. So I was a runner in high school, did marathons. I got married 3 weeks after high school. That's another story, another time, another day. But I was always running. But I went from getting very just bored with marathons to the early 2010s and 11s. I started doing ultras, which is this subculture in the marathon world. Any race over 26.2 miles is an ultra marathon. And so between 2010 to now, I've done a couple 100-mile races. I've done a race that till you can't run anymore. I've got a 200-mile race next March that I'm going to do. Even a 300-mile race I want to do in 2025. But running is part of my identity in a good way. And the Lord has used it to be a platform for the gospel. But yeah, I've been in it for a long time.
So what was it like and what got you into last year? You ran 153 consecutive marathons, meaning 153 days, and each day you ran a marathon. Can you speak a little bit about what got you into that and how was it?
Absolutely. So, the genesis of that was I have to go a little bit before that started and say that at the end of a couple of years ago, my oldest daughter, and I've been pretty open about this so people can see the story other places, attempted to take her life. And it opened my eyes to the reality of youth mental health.
Okay.
That as a pastor, there was a lot I didn't understand. And there's a lot that maybe I would just say, with my mindset, just smile, get over it, pray more, and that wasn't the answer because I didn't understand trauma and I don't want to go deep into that unless you want to, but so that was a big moment for us. So that was on my mind the end of that year. And I happened to have a conversation online with Tony Robbins. Literally, we had a conversation online, and he had said something that stirred me about if you want to make a difference, you got to take massive action now. And so I'm a little extreme in a lot of things, and so massive action meant either fasting or running. That's kind of how I think. And I discovered there was this lady, Jackie Hunts-Boezema. She was running to break the Guinness World Record for women for consecutive marathons. And so I looked up what she was doing. It was insane. It was psycho. But so I said, okay, that's the women's record. What's the men's? And the men's record was half of that. And I had this thought. I said, I think I can do that. And so the motivation was from this deep need that I wanted to raise awareness to the reality of youth mental health. And that was one of the things we ran for. Because my wife and I have learned so much about that. And there's so many people even watching right now that don't know where to turn, who to talk to, the spiritual dynamic, the emotional dynamic, the physical dynamic. And so I ran with that to raise awareness, because to do something like that, you have to have a pretty good why, because the novelty of it wears off. There's not enough likes or hearts or retweets in the world that make you want to get out of bed when it's minus 20 degrees below zero to go to a marathon, which that actually happened on December 23rd of 2022. Like, it was minus 20. I'm in Colorado. We're on, and it's insane. I'm going out, there's snow on the ground, and I got to do a marathon. I mean, it was so cold, but you have to do it. There was no turning back. And so
but there's also, wasn't there an elevation change?
Yeah. I'm in Missouri. I'm in the Midwest. It's 1,000 feet above sea level. No big deal. It was 8,500 feet above sea level. Oh, wow. It was radically different. And I wasn't fully prepared. And plus, I was doing that run because some of my runs had to be super early in the morning. So I think I took off at 2 a.m. that day. Because no matter what, I had to get it done before midnight, and we were on a family vacation. And so I didn't want to destroy the day with the family. So there's many days I got up at 1 or 2 a.m. to get it done in the morning.
Did you start doing Thanksgiving or after Thanksgiving?
So here's the unique thing. I started it on October 7th of 2022. Now, just sidebar note is I started another challenge on October 7th of this year with a global and emphasis, not knowing the significance of what October 7th would be globally. So I'm doing something different now.
We'll get to that in a second. So you start before Thanksgiving. You run every day a marathon for 153 days. Christmas, hot, cold, it doesn't matter. You were traveling. Thanksgiving, doesn't matter. Family vacation, you run the marathon. Have you ever gotten sick and you still ran a marathon?
I did. There was a day in early January, about a week before the Super Bowl, that I woke up in the middle of the night and had 103 degree fever with everything you don't want to have when you're sick. Let your imagination run wild. And I had that. And I still realized I have to go run. It took me 9 hours that day. It was not a pretty sight in any way, shape, or form, but I got it done. Because the reality, the significance of a mind that is set will control the body. I ran injured. I ran sick. I almost got ran over several times. I ran when it was raining for hours. I ran when it was snowing. But let me just say this though, because people always ask me, was it hard? I say, I never called it hard. You got to choose your own hard. And it wasn't hard. It was a challenge. I accept it. Hard is suicide. Hard is cancer. Hard is betrayal. Running is not hard. It's a challenge, but it's not hard. But there were days that didn't make sense. Days that took a lot of hours. Days where I was exhausted. Days I had no sleep. But the Lord was gracious every day. And I had some pretty fun, exciting days too, if you want to know about some of those. But your audience, sure.
Did you want, I'm pretty sure, did you want to quit every day and asking yourself, okay, maybe I should do other things. I'm a pastor. I should probably go and pray for people to help with mental awareness. Why am I doing this? Or I think also you're pretty much also a very disciplined person, but 153 marathons. How did you overcome those days that it was hard and it didn't make sense? Why are you doing this?
Okay, so the practical answer to that, because I think it's transferable to the audience that's watching, is I made a public commitment and statement that I was going to break the Guinness World Record. But that number, this is going to blow your mind right now. At the date of this recording was the actual date a year ago that I broke the original Guinness World Record. Because it was 62. So this is like the 1 year anniversary date of the time that we're doing this, of when that happened. So publicly, I went vocal everywhere that I'm going to do this. So sometimes when you want to do something crazy, you've got to make it known publicly so the pressure keeps you accountable. So I knew that I was going to get past there. Now, every day past that day was a little bit arbitrary, but here's how I did it. And this is how I think anybody else can do really crazy things. I never thought about the next day on that day. Okay. I just knew today I'm going to run a marathon. And I knew if I can get the first mile done, 25 more will follow. And when I would finish, then I would think about, okay, what's tomorrow look like? But when I didn't let my mind go on day 5 to day 40 or day 60 to day 100, I stayed present in the moment, every second of it.
Wow, that is incredible. Incredible mind shift. I feel like most people don't realize how not only running, but anything that even prolonged fasting has very little to do with your physical strength. It has to do with your mental resilience. And most of us realize how mentally weak we are until we have to do something like that. So you break this record on the, was it 63rd marathon?
It was
when you
the
broke the record?
63rd day I broke the record. Yeah, the record was 62. There was actually a gentleman from India that now has a little bit higher record than that till mine gets put in the book. He was chasing me. He was like 20 days behind me. So I kept going for a while, just not wanting this guy to catch me. So I'm tracking with this, okay? But I kept going every day after that, not knowing when I would stop.
Wow. Tell me about some of the fun things happened when you were running these marathons.
Okay, so and hopefully this becomes a book, because I've thought about this a lot. Some of the funnest things were people that ran with me. I had 3 people that ran with me, and the idea would be this, and I'm going to tell you
they ran.
Yeah, so they ran a marathon with me on different days. So one of those people was Eric Metaxas, okay? New York City. On day 151, I flew to New York, and Eric ran with me the majority of that marathon. So we ran from Manhattan to cross the George Washington Bridge. We ran where Bonhoeffer stayed right before he went back to Germany. So I was getting this personal Dietrich Bonhoeffer tour with Eric. And Eric's extreme. I love Eric. And so he's a runner. Most people don't know that. What people don't know about Eric Metaxas is he's hilarious and he's a runner. That was fun. And then Ronnie Floyd, who was former president of the Southern Baptist Convention, former CEO. He's actually one of the father figures in the fasting movement.
Yeah,
if people track in that side of the world.
Book.
And so he ran with me. And then I had a worship leader from the International House of Prayer that flew to New York City to run with me when I was on a flight back to Kansas City. And so he flew back and ran the very last marathon with me. But here's the principle. And this is why I love the Demon Slayers and you and Isaiah, because in life you need encouragers, people that text you, people that pray for you, but there's another level. And the nether level, and everybody needs this in their life, and they need to be this for somebody else. You need people that will run with you to see you get to your finish line. That's next level encouragement. And if you have a few people like that in your life that say, I'm committed to your dream and your vision, you'll get there. And there's a few people like that did that for me.
I remember when I was doing a 40-day water fast, what really helped me, well, I didn't do the part of announcing publicly, but I did made an announcement to my wife. And then I had a core team. When I told them, they all said, we've been feeling from the Lord to do the same thing. So we did it together. And all of us finished it together. And so it was, and when I think about, what you're doing, of course, that's a total different animal. When it comes to running a marathon is like some people's lifetime goal. To run 153 consecutive marathons back to back every day that's just unreal. That's just crazy. But there is actually a significance of number 153 from the Bible. What is that significance?
So I had no idea of that. That's my ignorance. Till Eric Metaxas convinced me that, because I was going to stop at 151, and Eric said, "Don't you know 153?" And for a guy who has a little bit of expensive theological education wallpaper, I didn't know that number. So he told me what it meant. I said, "Okay, we're doing 153." And so the number of fish that Jesus brought in a miracle. So it's a number of abundance, and it's also considered the number of nations that were around during the time of Christ. Now, I can't confirm that, but there is a deeply spiritual significance. Now, funny story. You're going to love this, okay? So you remember the premiere of Come Out in Jesus' Name, the red carpet premiere. Do you remember that?
I wasn't there, but I remember the day.
Okay. You remember that. I was running those days, so I was very out of it, but I was there. But the night before I go out for the day for the red carpet premiere, I go out of my hotel in Nashville to go out running, and there's a gentleman standing at the front of the hotel. Now we're like at the Ramada or it's not the 5-star hotel, but there's someone I think I recognize that guy at the front of the hotel, It's so random. And I run up to him. It was Francis Chan. Literally, Francis Chan.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Was at the front of the hotel, and he asked, and so I ran up to him, and I don't normally like try to get a picture, but I said, Francis, it's so good to see you. He asked me, are you my Uber driver? I said, I am not your Uber driver, but if I had a car, I would drive you. So, but it was fun. I prayed with him real quick, and he went to do whatever he was doing, and I went and ran. And when I see him again, I'm going to tell him that story. But there was just fun moments like that. Running with my family for the 2 pillar moments was fun. Then there was 2 races I ran in where I wore a suit because I wanted to create this character that was unstoppable. So when I felt tired, I said, I can't stop. I'm Dr. Run. Dr. Run doesn't get tired. Dr. Run doesn't quit. So I really created this superhero kind of mentality in my mind. And I would just say Malachi would quit, but Dr. Run wouldn't quit. And so I ran the Kansas City Marathon with a suit. People thought it was the funniest thing. And then I ran another marathon with a bright red velvet jacket. It's kind of now when I preach places and I can sneak it and pack it without anyone seeing it, I preach it.
Family, what did your wife think about all this?
She was ready for me to quit at the end, if I'm being totally honest. Like, hey, we got a family. But they were all on board. But by the end of it, I looked very unhealthy. I had to eat so much.
That's what I wanted to ask you. How healthy is that to run that many marathons?
No doctor will even recommend 1 marathon. So I didn't ask the doctor's opinion. Most people live at 40% of their capacity. They never do major things. And so most people just there's no doctor that would say fast 40 days on water. Like maybe you and Lou Engle are the only 2 human beings I can say that I know have fasted on water for 40 days. So I got very unhealthy at the end. I was having to eat so much. My body was falling apart. I looked worse than I did after a 40-day fast. Like I'd lost so much weight. Like it's hard to make contact. I was like 130 pounds. I looked bad. I looked pale. And I think I could kept going because my mind had gotten so strong that I just would have fallen apart. But it was that, again,
so
if you're
those of you who are watching this right now, 153 marathons, do not try this at home.
Yes, but I'm hoping Vlad does a couple marathons in a row. That would be great. Like I would feel like this was a successful interview if he commits to do at least one in 2024 while we're on this call. So I hope by the end you'll prayerfully consider, for the sake of your audience, everyone's going to watch this video.
I will need to start running first before that will happen. And then maybe, my brother ran marathon actually. My brother completed a marathon. So maybe it runs in my family.
So I'll fly to you if you will sign up for whatever local marathon you have, and I'll fly to you and run it with you. So just pick one 8 months from now. I don't care. I'll come your way.
I was actually thinking about it to do it as raising funds for the building. Because, some people do the biking and then running, a marathon and stuff. So now when it comes to, you have something else right now, actually this year, at the same time as you started last year, you're not done. Even though you're done with your marathon challenge, now you are running every day again for not just for 153 years, but you have this challenge that you are a part of as we speak. What is that challenge?
So we're calling it and I let me say this. I do want to, I know you'll get to this when a little bit further, but I could not have done what I have done without having gone through fasting. And we can get to that later, but there's something deeply significant. So I just want to put that out there, plant that seed.
Yeah.
Because it's so important when people realize.
I'm going to distract you then. I'm going to distract them. Were you ever fasting and running a marathon at the same time?
For January, I was doing a modified fast because my wife was very clear. You're not going to fast and run.
Yeah, because
I wanted to try it, but that's insane. So I did more of a juice fast mixed with Daniel fast during that time. But I needed 4,500 calories every day to not just lose all the weight I had. And I was losing weight, 4,500. But during the Asbury revival, I will tell you this, during the Asbury revival, there was a 2-day period in a row that I ate no food. I was so provoked at what God was doing at Asbury.
And did you still run?
I still ran those days. I still ran. I ran at Asbury. I was there for the final night of the Asbury revival. I ran that morning at 1 a.m., flew out of Kansas City at 9 a.m., and got there to the chapel building for the final night of the Asbury revival, and then ran in Kentucky the next morning before I flew home.
Oh my goodness, you're crazy. So now you're running half a marathon every day for how many days?
1,900, 5 years, until I pass 24,901 miles, which is the circumference of the globe. That's the challenge.
So you're running half a marathon every day for 5 years. Oh my goodness. And how many days are you in already?
We're calling it the Global Vision Initiative, okay? So I'm trying to sneak Greg Locke into something serious with biking, but I'm on day 63 right now. Every day.
And you ran today?
I ran today. I ran today. So I was up at about 3:30 a.m. 3:30 a.m. so I could get everything done. So I guess the biggest sacrifice, you need sleep. Mm-hmm. There's no way to circumvent that. But if I have to sacrifice something, sleep is what got sacrificed, and I just make that up later on. But I had to get up early today because I knew what today was going to look like, and so I've already run the half marathon for today, in the dark. Oh. But it's also helpful. I have a really crazy race coming in March that's really insane too. That actually helps me. So every day, no matter what, I'm telling you, I'm putting this for the audience. They can watch this video 5 years from now. I will run a half marathon unless I am in a wheelchair or I can't walk or I'm not alive. I will run that half marathon, no matter how inconvenient it is, no matter if I'm traveling, no matter if there's other things going on. It will get done every day by the grace of God, every day.
And you're a pastor, you're a father, you're a husband, you're also a speaker, everywhere, social media influencer, and then you have a doctorate degree from a university. So when you call yourself a Dr. Ron, you actually have a doctoral degree, not just an awarded degree, but the one that you actually went for and studied for. Now, I want to transition this more into another part of the discipline that will relate, I would say, more with believers as well, even though this is extremely inspiring and motivating, concerning fasting, because you have a very strong lifestyle as well of fasting. And could you tell me about how your fasting lifestyle began and what inspired you to start fasting, and when did that begin?
Absolutely. That's probably one of my favorite stories because it changed my life. And that's why I think I was so provoked when I heard you at the conference 2 years ago. And then I started just trolling you on social to see what you were passionate about. Because it's unique to find brothers and sisters who really pick up this sacred invitation to the more of God, which is fasting. That's what fasting is. But I was in the middle of finishing my master's degree at seminary, and I was 27-ish, and just something hit me. I don't know God. I mean, I'm born again. I know Him. He's answered prayer, but I don't know the supernatural experience of God. I read about revival. I'm not living in revival. I felt spiritually bankrupt in a matter of a few short days. And I just had this thought, if I don't experience God, I'm going to just quit seminary. Like, there's got to be more to life than this. And it just so happened that I was in seminary and we saw a video of when revival came to Cross Church in 1995, Dr. Ronnie Floyd. And it came because he had preached at his church after fasting 40 days. He preached at his church on a Sunday morning, and the Spirit of God visited that church. It changed that church. It changed his life. And I told God the next day, I'm going to start a 40-day fast. And I did. The very next day, I started a 40-day fast that forever changed my life.
Did you fast before an extended period of time?
No. I did 40-hour famine as a teenager, this youth group World Vision challenge. That was the most I've ever done. I thought I was good after 40 hours with that thing. If anyone remembers those days.
So you get inspired. You get inspired by this pastor who wrote a book on fasting as well. And the Lord just puts it in your heart that desperation to go into a fast. I have a very similar story, because when I went to a 40-day fast, I didn't fast longer than I think 6 or 5 days for years. It was only shorter fasts. And then I finally felt like I needed to overcome that fear, and the Lord put in my heart to go 21 days. And on the sixth day, that's when I sensed the Holy Spirit just dropped it in my heart to go for 40 days. I had no preparation for it. I didn't prepare my body, but when God just tells you, I knew that it was God, and my hunger for it also responded. And God gave me the grace to finish 40 days. Because I see sometimes people see these 40-day fasts or 21-day fasts as like something you build yourself toward, which I'm not against that. I think that has its place. But there's sometimes that place where you're hungry, you're desperate. And I love the fact that you highlighted, because it kind of happened with me too, is that you get inspired by somebody else's story. And that story can become the seed for your own transformation and your own hunger. And so how did those 40 days go for you?
So yeah, I imagine that probably similar to yours, but mine started the first 21 days. Well, okay, so the practical part is after 3 days, the hunger pains went away. Yeah. That's the practical part of the fast. First 21 days, the Lord convicted me of every sin I could possibly fathom. And I was searching my heart. And I had in those first 21 days, I was writing letters to former leaders of churches I was at, apologizing.
Oh, wow.
He was showing, it was like a cleaning out of my entire life. The final 19 days, I felt like I was living in heaven, because his presence became my food. And I was getting up early. I had no ministry success, whatever that is. I was throwing newspapers in the middle of the night. I was serving as a youth pastor. I was in seminary. Like, no one knew who I was. But I wrote things down in a journal that God is still answering today because of that. Because fasting is sowing into your life that you'll reap that harvest later.
Wow.
And so it has become the thing that calibrates my life for the presence of God. I'm weak. I'm broken. But when I fast, he becomes everything to me, and it brings me back to what's important, and that's his presence. Not ministry, not titles, not conferences, Jesus, his manifest presence. And that's why, I look forward to fast because,
Such a detox of what you just mentioned, almost like a soul detox when we fast, because fasting is a biblical way of humbling ourselves. And one of the ways, the first things that happens when, as you mentioned, when we begin to fast, sometimes we're like, man, I'm just going to experience greater measure of God's glory. But the first thing that begins to happen is that God exposes greater measure of our unworthiness, our sinfulness, our compromises. And as we, through repentance, God removes these layers of these ungodly thoughts, attitudes, underlying issues. We begin to feel more of God. It's not that I don't think God is closer to us when we fast. I think we just become more aware of him because all of the other junk gets removed. And I liked what you mentioned, how the reward for fasting rarely shows up during fasting. It's like we begin to see that down the years, decades. For me, I see this in the Bible even, where Jesus says, if the Father sees you fasting and he will reward you. Now, we don't fast for the reward. We fast for knowing him more. We want to humble ourselves, but God does promise that there will be a reward for us when we fast. So you complete this 40-day on water fasting, and you begin to see closer. You're closer and closer to the Lord. Did you started to kind of practice the more of an extended fast after that, or this was just one time done?
No, it became a significant pillar in my life. I have done a couple 40-day fasts since then, but pretty much every year since then, I've been doing a 21-day fast at the first of the year. And we've kind of organized that at the 2020s. But I've discovered something maybe even greater than planning out fasts, and it's something I learned from a worship leader named Misty Edwards, who talked about we need to live a fasted lifestyle, where we literally are in such a mode with God that if God said today, skip lunch, skip dinner, do it. We like, Lord, what can I say no to today to have more of you? I think God wants to live a fasted life. Okay. And so it's where we're constantly looking for ways to encounter him through saying no.
I like that. Not just, so we have these fasts, but these fasts are to spur us to live a fasted life. I like to also not eat in the morning. One of the reasons for that, not just because there's a healthy benefit, and a lot of athletes, they talk about, a lot of the self-help gurus talk about the intermittent fasting. But for me as a Christian, as a pastor, almost creating intentional hunger for at least 10 to 16 hours every day. necessarily do it every day, but I try to at least 5 out of 7 days to do that, both for health benefits, but mainly for spiritual benefits, and to take that time, the early hours, to spend time with God, and then to even feel that hunger, physical hunger. Because I believe that intentional physical hunger, when we make fasting a priority, it resurrects, quickens, recalibrates our spiritual hunger. Like what you mentioned, it's one of the tools. People sometimes say, I lost that edge in my walk with God. I lost that connection with my walk with God. And Jesus says, if the bridegroom leaves, then they will fast, meaning the way to recalibrate us, it's not that fasting moves God. Some people think, oh, you guys fast because you want to get God. God didn't move. God didn't fall from the throne. It's the fasting moves us back to humility, back to brokenness, back to repentance, back to consecration, back to realigning us with God. And that is the most important thing when it comes to fasting. Now, I want to ask you, Malachi, how did you actually become a Christian? I want to start going back to the beginning. What was your journey to faith?
It's very unique. I was adopted when I was 3 years old. My birth mom died when I was 12. Yep. So they were drug addicts and alcoholics, Denver, Colorado. And I was raised by family in middle of nowhere, Kansas, and no church background. But even though I wasn't going to church, I had this inner longing for God, although I couldn't articulate it even as a kid. And there was something I knew, but then this is just going to my context, my Baptist background context. There was a church in this little small town. We lived out in the country that had a bus ministry. That's old school evangelism, okay? For a certain 70s, it was popular. And the bus captain knocked on our door and asked if my brother and I could ride the bus to church. And we did. In a day where you just put your kids on a bus and let them ride to Sunday school. I had thought that Sunday school was like school that was on Mondays, but on Sundays. Sunday school is nothing like regular school, okay, if we're being honest. Yeah. They don't give you candy. But I went to church, heard the gospel, and within a matter of weeks, I gave my life to Christ. And then that church, they became like the mother and father I never had. They sent me to church camp that year, and God called me to preach months after I got saved. Because I owe everything to a church that invested in a kid that had nothing to offer.
Wow, that's right there. Mic drop moment. So important. Wow, that is crazy. So that's how pretty much, and it's one of the reasons that is it this time or the last year that you were running for both mental health, youth mental health crisis, and then also you're a huge champion of adoption and that, right?
Yes, absolutely. So we're running for that now still. So we've adopted, we've adopted one child. I was adopted. I've always wanted to adopt. I went to India as a teenager with the old ministry called Acquire the Fire. Okay, I'm dropping things for nostalgia purposes for your audience. But I went to India, and I thought I'm going to adopt somebody from a foreign country. Like, I just had this idea because it was in my life, and it never worked out for my wife and I. Then India was closed. But we always knew we wanted to adopt. And then we got this house that we're living in now. And I didn't know my wife had kind of made this deal with God that if you give us this house, we're going to fill with kids. I didn't know she made that deal with God. You make a deal with God, you better keep it. If you're going to make a fleece, you're bound.
That's right.
You have to keep it. And so we hear this story. I think this story I want to give you, this will blow you away. We had a family in our church that had a young boy with behavioral issues. Great kid. And he was supposed to get adopted, and then 2 weeks before, it didn't happen. It gets sent to another person. And the lady in our church gets this child, and he's broken. He's been in 7 homes in 8 years, and the trauma is insane. And then she says, can we watch him one weekend while she goes away? Okay, we'll do it. He's hot. It's like the wildest little kid in your church. You're like, this is insane. Well, she calls us and says, I'm not coming back to get him. So we have this kid in our house that she's not coming back to get him. So we said, can you give us the caseworker's number? Can we call them? And we basically said, we'll keep him. And then we said, we'll adopt him. And literally, we had a kid that didn't go home, and we said within a day, we'll keep him. What do we have to do to get him? So that's the story of adoption number 1. And now we're just, We're just a few days away, a month away at the time of this recording, of adopting a 1-year-old. So, we've gone from I have a 19-year-old daughter to now go all the way down. I'll have a 1-year-old we have a 1-year-old in our life right now. It's a whole different world. But so we feel called to this and to provoke others that adoption and foster care is a very tangible issue the Church of Jesus Christ can fix in America right now. Right now, that is something that the church could tangibly take care of. It's not easy, but nothing worth doing is easy. Fasting is not easy. Running is not easy, but it's worthwhile. And so it's a passion of mine because I was adopted. I really believe there's so many people with stories of adoption that I think needs to be told. But yeah, I'm a big proponent, and I understand it's a sacrifice. It's worth it.
You're also, anybody who follows you, hears you, you would think that just because you run all the time, that your passion, what you preach is on running or discipline, but you're actually burning for revival. What is revival to you?
The definition has changed for me over the years. And I believe there's a greater revelation of what revival really is and is not. I was once the president of One Cry, which is a nationwide revival ministry, powerful ministry. I'll give you the definition. I need to make a clear historical delineation for your audience. Revival is Jesus Christ. Jesus is the reviver. Okay, people go, what does revival look like? It looks like Jesus. You see, Pastor Michael Koulianos in Florida make this so clear. Where Jesus is not unto revival. He's not unto our initiative, our program, our campaign. He is everything, and he who is everything can be part of nothing. And so Jesus is revival. It's for the church, awakenings for the world. And I can go deeper in that, but let me say this. Historically, throughout the ages, you have two types of revival. You have word-centered revivals, that's Baptist world talk, and you have experience-centered revival, that's charismatic world talk. And throughout history, there's been these lanes of these word-centered revivals and experience-centered revivals, and in the hour we're living in now, they're merging together. It's beautiful.
And your thesis, your doctoral thesis and your research was actually about digital, the communication part. And you mentioned something before we went live. I want you to elaborate on that, how every time there was a shift in culture when it comes to the modes or the means of communication, God brought forth a new revival.
Absolutely. So every great movement of God in history.
I apologize. Something like that. There's something along the lines that I just said, correct?
Yeah, 100%. Let me just elaborate, because I think that, again, I'm an enthusiast of revival. I don't want to sound arrogant and say I'm an expert, but I have studied it, okay, because I'm desperate for it. Because let me just give it, the fame of revival spreads the flame of revival. If you telling stories of revival will provoke people to hunger for more of God.
That's a word.
So that's why we have to tell these stories. We have to tell stories.
The flame of revival spreads the flame of revival.
Flame of revival, yep. If you tell a story about what God can do in revival, people will run to altars to have it for themselves because they're desperate for more of God. They're desperate for what they were made for. And that's why we tell stories. That's why in a church, people remember our stories more than our amazing sermons that we put together. They remember our story. So I think we need to become revival flamethrowers everywhere we are. We need to tell the story of what God can do. I look at what God's doing through you.
When it comes to communication,
it's amazing.
When it comes to how the shift of communication, can you talk a little bit about the study that you did about how each generation, with the whole newspaper, the TV, and now media?
Yeah, this is amazing, and it's historical, it's provable. Every great movement of God in history has come on the heels of a communication shift because stories spread faster. So you look at the spread of the gospel in the days of the disciples, the Romans road had just been created. The spread of the gospel moved quick because of what the Romans did. Jesus came at the appointed hour when there was a transportation system in the world. Now that's very common knowledge. But fast forward, you could go all the way to the Gutenberg press, okay? The now that they can actually have multiple books, okay? what did God do? The Reformation happened around the time of the Gutenberg press. Just play around with the years for fun. Then you can fast forward even to the foundation of America. America is a nation forged in revival. You can tie revival movements in America to our founding and to what I'm telling you right now. So you go to the mid-1800s, there was a revival right before the Revolutionary War. There was a revival right before the Civil War, okay? There was actually a movement of God right before the Korean War, but I'm just pulling these things together. Newspapers were now printing 20 times faster than they had been before, and you have in the late 1850s, the Layman's Prayer Revival, Fulton Street, New York City. So what happened in New York could hit Chicago faster, could hit London faster. And so that's how that movement spread, because people started starting these prayer movements because they read what God did in that city and they wanted it in their city. That's the 1800s. Then you go to the early 1900s and you have the Shantung revival, and you have what God was doing in China, what God was doing with John and Goforth. You have, the India revival with John praying high. Okay. There's 4 or 5 significant movements of the early 1900s, because now you have, there's the telegraph and the early onset of radio communications. And be generous with the years here, because it's been a while since I looked at it, but stories were spreading faster. And then you go to the late 1940s, and this young, no-name revivalist named Billy Graham steps on the scene. And one of the first things that he did when he stepped away, from Youth for Christ, was he had a televised program that was on like NBC. And Billy Graham was a self-described revivalist before he changed the term to evangelist. And so his big break and a lot of stuff was TV. Then you go to the Jesus movement of the 1970s. Now, preceding all of these things is movements of prayer and fasting. Never forget that. But music shifted during the Jesus movement. Music was the medium during that time. And let me tell you something about every great move of God. They birthed ministries and movements and men and women. What the men and young people of the 1970s were the people God used in 1995 in Brownsville, Florida, and Brownwood, Texas. 2 significant movements. And these movements of God spurred other things. And let me show you this. Bill Bright called for 40 days of fasting. Right after that fast came the Brownsville, Florida revival. Right after that. And then people go, well, did revival hit the nations at like Bill Bright said it would? Well, I'm glad your audience just asked this question, because this little men's ministry movement got started in the late 1990s called Promise Keepers. Some of you have never heard of that. Season of revival. Liberty University was started there in the 1970s during revival. You have this little ministry to young people called Passion Movement. Louis Giglio started in the 1995 to 2000 range. He had an open vision on a plane of a field filled with young people. It happened during a season of revival. Now, here's what's provoking to me. At the end of 1999, or in 1999, God launched 2 night and day prayer movements on the same day, month, and year in 2 different countries, unbeknown to each other. Pete Greig started the 24/7 prayer movement in England on the same day that IHOP KC got started. Because revivals birth things, and they launch people. And so again, so you got internet was just starting right around that time. And now social media is still in its late teenage years. And they would consider what happened at Asbury spread by TikTok. That was spreading wildly on TikTok. And so every time that something comes out that stories should spread faster, God does something. So I'm like a proponent, get on the next social media app, do all these things. Let's spread the stories everywhere. Let's live stream everything, because this seems to be the mode God has used.
That's incredible. So pretty much what we're seeing is that prayer and fasting is what begins to birth revival. And revivals begin to birth movements, ministries, men and women of God. And God times these revivals around the shift of communication that is happening in the culture to broadcast and spread this revival faster to reach more people.
That's the truth. That's what he's always done. And every revival in history always looks different. So people go, I want another. God never repeats anything. He only does greater things.
Come on.
Not lesser things, greater things. But like, we won't see another Jesus movement like the Jesus movement. That's why this revival right now in Gen Z is on fire. Like, for anyone who's watching, there's something God's doing. And it's a revival, not of signs and wonders per se, not of various other things. It's a revival of, this is a first love. That's what I saw at Asbury, was it was just young people that wanted to burn for the Lord with prayer and worship. And so I really believe it's coming back to where it always started, and that's the person and work of Jesus Christ. And Gen Z, I believe, is the revival generation. And our job as leaders in the body of Christ. And I'm gonna give like one of those mic drop moments for you in just a second here. I think this is like quoting and people to post online immediately. Our job as leaders is to speak revival identity into the next generation. But I asked one of my professors one time, am I old enough? He just said this quote. He said, you may not be old enough to start a revival because it's historically young people. He says, I may not be old enough to start a revival, but I may be old enough to stop one.
Whoa, that's okay. Well, that hurts. Wow. That's a word right there. Yep. That's true. And a lot of times people who are older, who have seen or read about revival, they become critics instead of the ones who can pioneer or at least encourage, steward the young people who are stepping into the revival. And, I agree with you that the Gen Z, even the younger generation after them, are experiencing a revival. I heard a statistic that people in my generation, my parents' generation, they share their faith. About 2% of believers, they share their faith. This young generation, once they get saved, 80% of them share their faith. They're just radical in that. Of course, there's a huge attack on mental health. The number one leading cause of a lot of the Gen Zs is suicide, and it's not even higher than accidents and other things. So the enemy wants to take them out. He wants to end their life so that they don't give their life away for a cause worth living for and worth dying for, cause greater than themselves, cause of the Lord, of Jesus Christ. And I see this happening, Malachi, right now in our youth group. The youth group that we have in our church, we are in about 5 public schools every week, where we preach the gospel there in a public school. So we had about 300 students that got saved so far in public school, not at church, in public school. And majority of the students, we have about 300 up towards to 400 kids that show up on Sunday night. Half of them are brand new believers and their parents don't go to church yet. And seeing them get radically on fire for Jesus, we're seeing deliverances breaking out in public school, kids taking their electric cigarettes and other means by the which they inhale and do the weed stuff, and then flashing down toilet in a public school after going to our club. And so when I see that, I'm like, man, when I was in high school, we didn't have that breakthrough. I mean, we prayed. I would go for 2-3 hours before going to high school and pray. I just didn't see that explosion of people radically getting saved on the premises of a public high school. And so I totally agree with you. I see something shifting. I see something happening. And I think that these prayer movements that's been happening in England and here in the United States, there has to be a response. I see that God's heaven is going to respond to this. And we're going to be seeing this greater move of the Holy Spirit. That's why I really feel strong to draw people to fasting and prayer, because we are standing on the edge of something even greater that God wants to do in our generation. Even what's happening right now with the deliverance awakening, that is awakening the church, people getting delivered. A lot of people that are showing up to my meetings, our meetings right now, came to know the Lord during the COVID days, watching live streams. I mean pastors, leaders everywhere now who are like, I got delivered. I was sitting with the bucket, watching a video, got delivered. Now my church is growing. And all of this happened just in the last few years. I mean, COVID was bad, but God also used it to accomplish some of his plan to revive the church and to quicken the body of Christ. Malachi, any final words you have for people that are in fasting mode right now, who are maybe lethargic, those who are not fasting and praying, lethargic, kind of lazy, don't feel that that draw, could you give them that final push to get out of their couch and go do something for Jesus?
Yeah, well, and before I say that, let me just say this. I heard you speak this last year at the Deliverance conference with Pastor Greg, and you really rallied the next generation. I mean, I remember the sermon. It was about Samson, and the young lad led. I mean, I remember that, and it provoked me again for what we just talked about. So I commend you for being one of the voices that are saying things like, "Let them lead now, let them serve now, let them preach now." Like, that takes a lot of trust. And I champion that in you. I just want you to hear me say that, because I watch. And so, yeah. And so practical tips on fasting is not so much a command as it is a sacred invitation. It's a command for repentance. Look at Joel. But here's a phrase that a friend of mine said, and I think it fits this hour we're in history. So I'm going to give this philosophical phrase and then just give practical tips for fasting that I think is super helpful. A Psalms 2 crisis. Why do the nations rage? A Psalms 2 crisis demands a Joel 2 response. A Psalms 2 crisis demands a Joel 2 response for an Acts 2 outpouring. Psalms 2, Joel 2, Acts 2. We're in a Psalms 2 moment. We must have a Joel 2 response. Celebrity Christianity is being cut to its knees. And then we need to slice the throat and break the kneecaps of celebrity Christianity. We don't need it anymore, okay? And so then I believe the outpouring is coming. So for people, if you want more of God, there's a part of God you will only get when you fast. So I would ask this question to people, not will you fast? Give me a good reason not to fast. Give me a good reason not to have more of God. Give me a good reason not to experience more of his presence. Give me a good reason not to see more miracles. Give me a good reason not to see lost people come to Christ. Give me a good reason for prodigals not to come home. Give me a good reason for addictions not to be broken. If you can give me a good reason, you get a hall pass. You don't have to fast. But if you can't, join us. And the practical tip I have for people is go read some old books on prayer and fasting. Go read Leonard Ravenhill, Why Revival Tarries. And when you get off of your face from weeping, tell me what you're going to do next. So go read the old books, E.M. Bounds. I mean, go read the greatest book that's been written in the last 50 years about hosting the Holy Ghost. Like, read that book. You know, I know the author. Okay. Read these books and then watch sermons. Ravenhill, Derek Prince, Ronnie Floyd, Lou Engle, Jensen Franklin.
Why Revival Tarries is a great book. It's like, it's a slap book. That one is Ian Bounds is like just beautiful, but I feel like you read Why Revival Tarries is just like Ravenhill just slaps you, just every single statement, just kind of, it's a good wake up call
Every time.
Yeah.
It's like WrestleMania, and he's just like dropping the people's elbow. The Rock, just referenced there on us all. So anyway.
Well, Malachi, I just want to say a huge thank you for an opportunity to have this conversation. You inspire me both to live a more consecrated and more disciplined life for Jesus privately and publicly. The conversations that I have had with you, I left, burning in my heart. I'm like, and of course, convicted, slightly condemned that I need to start running again. And but I'm back at the gym now and stuff. So that's I'm just taking one step at a time for that. So thank you so much for also inspiring people who are fasting, who are praying. Our Fast Forward group that does the 21-day fast, and just really appreciate you. I'm praying for you, praying that God's going to give you the grace to finish these commitments that you have made and use you for His glory. And so God's best for you.
Thank you so much. Honored to be on the show. Thank you.